decades, first of all, here. Talk to us a little about your childhood, where you grew up. You know,
I feel like Betty White.
But I mean, what was it for you, and how did sports play a big role in your childhood?
Well, I was born in Chicago and grew up a Cub fan, which either a Cub fan or a White Sox fan. My mother was a baseball fan. Her claim to fame was she had one of the apartments outside of Wrigley Field across the street, which now would be worth a ton of money, which was just an apartment then. And she saw Gabby Hartnett's homer in the Gloman, whatever they called it, after dark and stuff. So she was a Cub fan. So I think I still have a ticket stub, 60 cents to take a kid, to take an adult and your kids on Ladies' Day to Wrigley Field on the L. So that was the first thing. Is Ernie Banks, I saw his first game. You know, little did I know he'd be a Hall of Famer. So baseball was a sport that I was exposed to. Then we moved to California in 1956, played Little League Baseball, and I don't think they had organized football and basketball then. Then moved to Orange County in 1959 when there was oranges and no grocery stores and no traffic lights, things like that. And went to an Walter Knott Elementary School, as in Walter Knott. We used to play in this parking lot, so that was our playground. And started playing basketball at 5th grade. Said, God, this is a lot more fun than baseball. So I was just exposed, and then started playing football in junior high and high school, and just played and didn't know any better, really. It kept you off the streets, literally, although you would play at night. We got into some mischief on our own, but nothing ever any troublesome. My dad was he died when I was in like 7th grade, so he wasn't much of an influence other than he was a sports fan himself, and he umpired Little League until someone yelled at him. He said, "Okay, I'm out of here," and walked out in the middle of the game. All my friends were athletes, so that was just kind of a natural thing to do. And that's in the era when you just went out and played for fun. Like I said, we played in the Knott's Berry Farm parking lot. It was grass, and they had trees. They're probably every 5 yards apart, so we treated them as 10-yard lines. And it was our football field, and we played 3-on-3, 4-on-4, touch, or we probably played tackle now and then when we felt real brave. And we didn't have those organized and travel teams or something like that. Whatever season it was, we played. So it's just kind of all I knew. And then I got to college, and I played like Cal State Fullerton freshman basketball. Hated this place. It was terrible. Like I said, everybody on the team except one guy left, and I went to Cypress Junior College. I came actually to play football. They said they're going to have a football team in 1968. Enrolled. They said, "Oops, sorry, 2 more years." So I went to Cypress to play football and basketball, and then about killed myself trying to play 2 sports, and then said, "This is it. I can't compete this level." I went to Arizona State. And this is a long story, but basically I said, okay, all I know is sports. I don't want to coach. I want to put up with athletes. I was like the ideal coach's athlete, and I wasn't going to have the patience to deal with somebody who wasn't like me. So I said, what am I going to do? I kind of like journalism, so one thing led to another, and went to journalism school and got a degree in communications and became a newspaper writer for sports.
What did you normally do at Arizona State? Were there any sports that you really focused on?
Well, actually, when I went there, because all I had done is sports, I said I'm purposely not focused on sports. So this is in the campus unrest. I was covering riots, and there was a lady called the Moore House, M-O-E-U-R. To this day, I know how to spell it because I wrote the story, Moore, M-O-O-R-E. I wrote a story for the school paper. It was a banner story, and I looked at it and go, oh, they misspelled her name. No, they got it right, because I just assumed it was Moore, and it was M-O-E-U-R. And so I did just news story to see if I liked journalism, and I did, and stayed with it. But I think finally my senior year I covered track. Baldy Castillo was the track coach. They had a javelin thrower, 300-foot guy, Mark Muro, I think his name was. So I finally got back into sports, but this was Vietnam time. I thought I was going to get drafted, so I wasn't really looking for a job because what was your lottery number? 197, and they were at like 170 in June. I'm going off to the jungles, and then some guy, Bob Lennard, was a sports editor at the Fullerton News Tribune. Let me back up. So I'm thinking I'm going off to the jungle someplace. I went to an Angel game the night after Clyde Wright pitches no-hitter for the Angels, 1970, and they put a message up on the board. Congratulations to Fullerton Tribune sports writer Pete Donovan and his wife on the birth of their daughter. I go, I went to school with Peter. I worked with him at Cypress College, so I looked him up, and he was at the Fullerton News Tribune, and he said, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm waiting for my draft notice to come. Not much. I'm working in a warehouse. What am I supposed to do? I'm not going to look for a job because we just fired a guy. They need somebody. So I went to cover a high school all-star game in the summer, like a trial run, and the guy hired me, and that's how I became a sports writer.
How long did you work as a sports writer? I mean, was that era right after Arizona State until you eventually, at some point, got to Fullerton?
Yeah, no, I graduated in June. Like I said, I thought I was going to get drafted, and I should mention that the draft lottery stopped at 195, so I was two numbers. I was ready to join the psychological warfare unit at Fort MacArthur because I didn't want to get drafted, but that's the one lottery I won. I never played the lottery again because I already won the big one. So I got hired. I was working in September of '70, and worked there a couple years, and then this man I'm talking about, Pete Donovan, he left. He was covering the Angels. That was his beat. So I got to cover the California Angels in 1971, which if a real Angel fan will realize that was the horrible year where Fergosi busted up his foot. Alex Johnson had guns in the locker room, and it was turmoil. So actually, it was pretty good news stuff, but it wasn't pleasant. So I was in the middle of all that kind of stuff, covering the Angels, and in the off season after the '72 season, George Goodale was Gene Autry's PR guy back from the rodeo days. I mean, Chief. His nickname was Chief because he was a real Indian. And Cowboy and Indian, they worked together, and he was retiring, and they needed somebody to replace him. Well, the Angels knew me from having covered the team, and I played poker with the guys in the winter, so right place, right time, and got a job with the Angels. So and at that point, I was kind of burned out on sports writing because having been an athlete and taking the coach's viewpoint, I kind of like the positive side of it. I didn't enjoy the part where you had to rip people, and the local paper. We were pretty positive with the high schools and JCs and colleges, but when you're covering the major leaguers, and now you could be critical, and I didn't enjoy that as much, so I saw that as an opportunity to be on the PR side, the good side, and it turned out I worked for the Angels for 6 years and then ended up here 32 years telling the positive side of things and trying to ignore the negative stuff.
Now, you've also had actually a lengthy, a lot of people don't know this, is you've served as a backup scorer with the Angels. At the time, they were the California Angels, now Los Angeles Angels. I mean, any good stories that you remember from there? And a lot of people don't realize it's not easy being an official scorer.
I always tell people it's easy to see when it goes up hit or air, then to make a comment on it. But when you got to be the person that puts up the H or the E, that sets yourself up for the debate, then it's a little tougher. Now, when I left the Angels in '78, I actually got in real estate and development, trying to make some money for a year. That didn't work out so good. I think interest rates got to 18% or some crazy if you check the history. So I was the official scorer. I was the guy in 1980 season because Reggie Jackson and Nolan Ryan and Howard Cosell had gone off on the Angels. It's a long story, but basically there was a controversial call. The newspaper guys had always been the official scorers, but then when they started making headlines for their calls, the newspaper said, wait a minute, our guys are there to cover the news, not make the news. So suddenly Major League Baseball had a problem. The Baseball Writers Association of America wasn't going to score games anymore after 100 years. So they started looking for people who had been to baseball games, and the rule then for the baseball writers was you had to see 100 games a year, which meant you had to travel some and see a lot of home games. Well, I fell into that niche because I'd worked for the Angels, 81 games at home, and traveled enough. So I was their official scorer in 1980, but then when I got the Fullerton job in August of '80, I saw right away that those two schedules weren't going to jibe too good. So they gave it to a guy named Ed Munson, who, who scored every game until about 4 or 5 years ago. Had an amazing streak going in the American League, or actually Major League Baseball said we need to diversify a little bit and have more people. So they called me and said, hey, we remember you from eons ago, do you still want to do it? And I said, now I got more time and I'll do it on a limited basis. So yeah, I guess it's 5 years. But when I did the first time, my unfavorite player was Carney Lansford, because he had this god-awful stance, spread eagled, and it was awkward field. He was a good athlete, and ironically, his son ended up playing baseball for Cal Poly, I guess it was a couple years ago. Anyway, he had a lot of tough plays that he made him look tougher because of his stance. And offensively, he could run pretty well, but right-handed hitter, so he was always moaning and groaning about, and I was still stringing for AP at the time, so I'd be in the clubhouse, it was like had a target on your back. There's the official score, and he'd come after you, and he'd whine about something, whereas Bobby Grich was just the opposite. He said, hey, you should give me an error on that play. I should have made that play. Okay, what do you say? Now they've changed the rules so you don't go to a clubhouse, and they've actually changing the rules for 2012, or not even a PR guy for the team can even question your call now, so I don't know if that's going to be easier or harder. But the fun quote in the last regime was Orlando Cabrera, the shortstop, was with the Angels. It was quoted in the paper saying, Anaheim has the dumbest sports scorekeepers in America. So I took that as a compliment because I had only given like one error all year long, so I think he was picking on Munson, but I went along with it.
What was it do you remember how you got hired to Cal State Fullerton? What were the circumstances that brought you here in '81?
Well, the same guy keeps popping up. Pete Donovan was a sports writer for the LA Times. He told me that in typical Fullerton fashion, the previous SID got fired because they couldn't find him to tell him he was fired. John Caldwell, who had been here, and I know John after the fact. At the time, didn't know who he was, but now having known what he went through, I can understand maybe why he just disappeared. But he took off in June, and they couldn't find him. And they hired Gene Murphy, and they'd already hired McQuarn. These new coaches eager to get some attention and publicity, and they couldn't find him. So they finally just put the job up or open, and somehow you got word that he'd been fired. And it was an interview situation, and Donovan. I don't think he was on the committee, but Judy Garm was on the committee, Buck Johns, the booster was on the committee, people I knew, because I had a little connection. I'd helped Augie Garrido get his baseball camps going in 1979. Again, I had that real estate business where I had some free time to do it. And I also helped Augie with his Hot Stove League dinner, which he filed into the Orange County Sports Hall of Fame. So I had kind of an in. So again, it's sometimes who you know, not necessarily what you know. And like I said, I got hired, and before I got hired, I was already working here.
Looking back on it now, when you first got hired, did you even think how long did you give yourself?
That's the problem.
Yeah, I mean, did you really think like you were gonna? Would you have said at that time, knowing how old you were at the time, would you said, "Oh yeah, I'll be here 30 plus years"? I mean, did that even come into your mind at all, or it was just something that as time went on, you appreciated the job and you appreciated the environment you were at?
Well, the first day I started, they handed me an office with no phone and a typewriter that had a carriage on it, twice the length of normal, because it was a chemistry typewriter. It had all these symbols, but no dollar sign. So that was a bad omen. I said, this may not last. But yeah, no, they had to be serious about it. I never in wildest dreams would have thought to stay that long. I'd kind of take one day at a time. Never had any great goal or plan, which sometimes might be a negative, but just worry about the next day and control what you control. Worry about what you can control, not what's out of your hands. And maybe that mentality is enabled me to survive, and I survive uses that word in this.
A lot of things about being a sports information director that people really don't understand. One, you have to be a people person, but you really have to juggle a lot of things because you're taking care of student athletes, but you also have to work with coaches. You also have to work for administrators. There's all these different agendas that normally work on it, and usually at a place at Cal State Fullerton, something that we're used to. Again, it would be like a situation where baseball, where you didn't have the money to be able, so you have Tim Murphy or myself, we're doing 6 jobs at once doing the PA announcing. I mean, that's something that you just got used to, and that seemed to be like a trademark for you, is to be able to make the best of what limited resources you had as a SID.
Well, it's the job description alone. It's a jack of all trades type job, and it's changed. Actually, it's not so much a people person anymore, which is the sad part about it. It's a computer, send this, Twitter and Facebook and all that kind of stuff. So there's some people you deal with all the time. You've never met them face to face. You don't travel as much. So that's kind of the downside. The upside is there's so much more information out there and so much more demand for it, I guess. Without the beat reporters, though, it's like we've had games this year with one newspaper reporter and maybe none. There probably was one of those. So it's changed a lot. You had to know something about photography, you had to know something about typography, you had to know something about writing. You had to do interviews, both ends of the camera suddenly now. That's a change. But that keeps it fresh too. And the other thing is the sport's changing. Working for the Angels, it was baseball. 6 months of the year was full season. Then you had, when I was there, you had October off because they never played much. Yeah, but when the Super Bowl was over, you went to work, and right away now it's 12 months a year with all the media and the websites and all that kind of stuff. So that you could kind of, especially with some bad seasons, it kind of get treacherous the last month of September, kind of monotonous going out there. Whereas here, one season ends and another one starts, and if you're having a bad team, there's probably a good team starting that you focus your attention on. So the versatility or the diversity can be a godsend or a handicap.
How communication has really changed. Okay. How we deal with people now. It used to be, like you said, situations of where you were dealing with people all the time. Now you're dealing with them behind a computer monitor. Have you found that that's changed your role also within the athletic department? Because now you don't really maybe see everybody as much as you used to.
Yeah, technology has changed. It changes everything, but it really changed our business. And on campus, you were talking about the family atmosphere. I think that's one of the downfalls now is people, again, our location, we're scattered. You have soccer coaches at the soccer stadium, the baseball coaches there, you got the basketball coaches in one hallway, the track coaches down another hallway. We're in a closet that nobody can find. haven't had a window in 32 years, a little editorial statement there. And then the administrator is in the Titan house, so you don't end up at the copy machine, you don't end up at the water cooler, places that you obviously used to interact with your peers. Now you've got to go to games, so everyone's got a game face on, so yeah, you communicate by emails, and that's so impersonal. We've had some colorful sports writers in our past. I mean, some of the stories, John Weiler, and there's some nicknames I can't use, and the late Larry Borstein, and Lon Eubanks, and it was fun. Janice Carr still writing for the Register, Mike DiGiovanni at the Times, and we can tell stories about those people. Now, we don't have a beat writer anymore, so it's really kind of sad. There's some pluses to it. When things are going bad, there's no one there to ask the negative questions, but that doesn't happen too often. The downside is the coverage. You don't feel like, you're sending us out in this vacuum. You can measure the hits and things like that on the computers, but you have no idea. Whereas before, the newspaper you get calls the next day about a newspaper story because there was a commonality. Everyone read the same story pretty much at the same time, and it was good, bad, and different. They were all in the community together, where now everyone gets their information at their own schedule, and they probably don't share it with anyone.
And you feel like there was that change. Like I said, it's funny going back and telling kids now, it's good to give them appreciation of what history was like. To say the fact, to do a fax machine, you had to put your handset in the handset. It took 6 minutes to do one page. And I still remember, it's funny, I just flashed, like you'd mentioned, you'd be sitting there in shorts before a football game, your gray Mazda pickup truck, you're unloading the ditto machine,
and the tables and the extension cords,
and you're going up to the Santa Ana Stadium, and you're going up. It was
no elevator.
Level. Yeah, no elevator, and you had to climb up the whole time. Those are the memories that you have. I mean, I still remember working for John Riemensdorf and Kent Briggs on good old Money Radio, 1600 AM, and those are the things that you really remember that you want to try and tell, this generation now that. Not to be wax poetic about, this is what I was like when I was that age, but it really is good to embrace that history and kind of show what it was like before and to see where it is now.
A lot of times I feel like I've turned into an old guy that I used to talk about, those old guys telling those old stories. Well, they're old stories because they're old. It's just the calendar. Like Chuck Hebert, we talk about the one sports I didn't mention. Gene Murphy's nickname for it was Nuts and Bolts, and it was really applicable because he was the consummate journalist, reporter. Wasn't a great writer. His other nickname was Grantland, which is in sarcasm. It wasn't Grantland Rice, it was Grantland Hebert, it was Nuts and Bolts. He just persistent, asked questions, always had an ear out, always had information because he had contacts. Because what you got? And he had this kind of almost a sneaky attitude, but you enjoyed it because he was so sincere, and he wasn't vindictive or wasn't looking for negative stuff. Some of these sludge reports or whatever they call it. I don't know what some of that stuff is. He was just doing his job, getting the information, and he put it out there. He didn't give a slant to it, and that's kind of what journalism, everyone would have been taught about. Here's the facts, you decide for yourself. And I kind of miss that, yeah.
One thing, before getting into that, as far as you saw the years go by, instead of having normally, again, the late John Riemensdorf, who did football and did other sports as well, you started taking a role where you started doing a lot more broadcasting as it was. And I always tell, believe it or not, I tell a lot of broadcasters, there seems to be the sense now of ESPN and other entities where it's all about the sportscasters almost make the news. But we were so fortunate as far as when we were growing up because we had Vin Scully, you had Dick Enberg, Bob Starr, and I've always noticed that in working with you, especially during baseball, what I always liked about, and my style has kind of been the same way, is where you just all you have to do is call the game. Let the action call itself. You don't have to mix in all of your opinions about all this other stuff because a lot of people are a lot smarter than you think, and you're able to pick that up. So kind of the style that you have dealing with being an SID on a day-to-day basis, you could pretty much pick that up on your broadcasting. And how did you feel once you started getting into doing baseball and basketball? Did you feel comfortable?
I said earlier I didn't have any great goals or ambitions, but I really did have one out of high school, to be a professional announcer. Growing up as a baseball fan, listened, as you mentioned, Scully and Jack Brickhouse in Chicago. It was a little different style. But I took an announcing class at Arizona State, and the instructor said, "You got a horrible voice." And I can't sing a note, so he had something going for him there. So I just kind of let that slide, and then at Fullerton, just for logistical reasons, it made sense to do the color on the football radio cast. first it was Dave Iverson doing the first season, and late in the season, the game at Pacific, he got sick in the press box in the third quarter, had to run. And I mean, run. He says, Mel, it's you. And he took off and left the box. First I didn't know what was going on, and I figured it out real quick. Suddenly I'm doing play-by-play, and I'd done color all year, but it's a whole different bird there. Instead of reacting to the play and analyzing it, now you're trying to call the formations, who carried the ball, who made the tackle with a spotting chart. It was weird. Just by the time he got back, I was getting the hang of it. I'd like to do some more. Well, we finished out that season, then we had a new announcer, and I kept doing color. And then 1991, we had a new radio crew, and basically they went out of business with 2 games to go in the season. So Ron Fremont and I, you mentioned my former assistant, we did the game at Northern Arizona, and it wasn't too difficult. So then 92, the last season, well, why hire a new announcer for one more season? So I did the games, and got decent reviews. I still got a column from John Hall in the LA Times saying, hey, this guy wasn't bad after all. So I took that as a high compliment. But then we hired another professional announcer, a guy named Steve O'Hare out of Utah. And to make a long story short, he lost our radio equipment. And we, to this day, don't know if he lost it, stole it, hawked it, or whatever, but he was dismissed. So Steve Dottola, the associate AD, and we said, well, let's do baseball. We can do it from LSU, Baton Rouge, the regional, 92. Well, we went down there, we won the regional. We got to, everything being superstitious, you got to do the games in Omaha. So we're doing games from Omaha. Here's the guy who's announced for probably 20 years in college baseball, dying to go to Omaha. Here's 2 schmucks that just did it because we couldn't afford to pay somebody for real. We're doing it, and we're in Omaha, and we went to 92, went to the national championship game. So now that's spring of 92. Now we got the 92 football season. I did that season, and then said, well, you must do basketball. John Riebensdorf had left us. He went to UCLA, his big goal in life, and then he passed away like a year after that. So I've done the basketball up until the last couple of years, and then when audio streaming came out, we did that's our other little claim to fame, and I didn't realize at the time, but Mark Cuban's broadcast.com, we audio streamed the first college baseball game ever. We played, it was the first game of the 96 season. We just won a national title. We opened the season 96 at Stanford. So someone that doesn't make a big deal about it. And I think Kyle Peterson pitched that game, pitched like a 1-hitter, took a no-hitter in the 7th or something like that. So anyway, Mark Cuban, for whatever reason, I didn't know at the time, but he became pretty famous. But so audio streaming, in a lot of ways, is better than radio because you can track who it is. I remember Dirk Rasloff, a basketball player we had, average player, but he had a brother in Germany who could listen to the games. This is great. So it's fun. And your question about the style, it's just conversational. And I was around Dick Enberg for a lot of times, and that's a pretty good guy to be around. And he basically said, you're talking to Joe Fan. 20% of them are going to hate you no matter what you say. 20% are going to love you no matter what you say. This other 60% they're in the middle. That if you can please them, you're doing well. So I just try to treat it conversationally. It's not rocket science. It's not life and death, although some fans in Oklahoma or some of those places it is.
The difficult part about being a sports information director, it's not a standard 9-to-5 job.
No.
It's 6-7 day weeks. It's sometimes you're doing 60, 80-hour weeks, and it's very difficult sometimes. You have to have the right wife in Nancy that you've had, and to have a family to kind of balance things out. First of all, where did you meet Nancy, by the way?
In high school, a high school romance, although we split up when I went away to Arizona and came back and got married before I was going off to Vietnam, but then that never happened. So.
But how's it been to have somebody like her that obviously she understands the commitment that you have towards the job and the fact that she likes sports as well? I mean, how has that really helped you out is definitely over the years through here at Fullerton?
Oh, tremendously. Right now, my peers in the conference, I think there's only 3 of us are married, and it's for good reason because there's not a lot of women out there like that. Part of it starts with her mother. I just lost my mother-in-law at age 98. She was a dream. She drank beer, played poker, loved sports and country music. What more can you ask for? And Nancy she doesn't drink beer, but the rest, or I guess she doesn't play poker either, but the rest, they like sports, and my kids have grown up with it. Haven't pushed them and all, but they're sports fans. I've had them working for me. That's one way to keep the family together. You're on stats tonight, you're on the shot clock. And you see that happen in Division II, Division III some places, but we did here. I know Mickey Turner, their Orange County Register, did a story on it. All 3 of them were working some game. If you want to see me, you got to come to the workplace. But they like the games, and we've traveled, and at times you plan your life around it. Like we can't plan a vacation in June because we may end up in Omaha. And the one year I went to the river, we surprisingly won, and I ended up flying from Las Vegas to Omaha to catch up to the team because I was in shorts on 100-degree weather or something like that. So yeah, that's a godsend to have somebody like that home. The sad part is they all like sports so much. When we're not playing, they want to go to a game, and like, I don't want to go to an Angel game. You know, if I'm working, is one thing, but to this day, I mean, I have trouble sitting watching a sporting event without something to do. It's, you know, I'll be reading the paper or doing something. I can't just hardly focus on a team.
Having two kids like Tracy and Jason, and like you said, they basically grew up around sports, and you saw them all the time. Now in the situation where now you're a grandfather, and you're kind of at that point to, you know, your time to where you're kind of wrapping up your career here at Cal State Fullerton. How have things changed for you, at least in the last 30 years? And has it been a lot more rewarding for you to be able to have a family to share that with, not only just, you know, your wife and your kids, but also having grandkids?
Well, the technology is going to change it. So I used to live 5-minute walk from campus. Now I live 26 miles, which could be 2 hours on the 91 freeway, something like that. But the beauty of it is, once you go home, you're home because you're so far away. You can't come back, but yeah, you can work from home if policy allows it. Where before I'd go home for dinner and then, okay, I can come back to the office for an hour and a half because of the 5-minute bike ride or 10-minute walk, whatever. It was too convenient, so that was kind of a guilty trip. Best example I can use of how things have changed, we're not supposed to travel the men's basketball overnight trips anymore for budgetary reasons. But I got a motorhome, so Nancy and I took the motorhome. We drove on our own to Santa Barbara and covered the game, and then spent the night on the beach there, and then drove the next 2 nights on Pismo Beach, and then coincidentally was near San Luis Obispo, so I covered that game, and then drove home because she just retired, so she's free to go now. So that's probably the biggest change is there's freedom to go. But she's made. Well, I think the whole family went to Omaha for the basketball regional. They were not on the plane, however. They paid their own way. And I think all of them have been to Omaha for the College World Series a couple times at least.
Being able to have Jason now is he's in the sports field. It's a different field, but does that kind of give you some satisfaction that you're able to kind of, get his foot in the door, and now he's doing something that he enjoys doing as well?
I didn't notice at the time, but Lynn Rogers mentioned to me, he says, you should be pretty proud that your son kind of followed your footsteps and got into sports, and I never really had thought about that, but like I said, I didn't push them, and they kind of went that way on their own. And my daughter, now she's an athletic academic advisor at junior college a little bit more Park, so I guess she's kind of followed the same path, so guilty as charged.
What do you really, and I know you don't think about it on a day-to-day basis, but is there maybe something that you take away from Cal State Fullerton that you really just are really grateful for, as far as, somebody that's worked here for so long, you come up, like I've said before, with so many great memories that you can think about. Is there anything that you think to yourself that this was really the direction that I wanted my life to go?
You're getting too philosophical for me. I don't think that heavily, but no, I think just being exposed to so many different people and being around sports. Again, I say I don't know any better, but partly it's positive people. You're always trying to win. You're trying to accomplish something. Teamwork and working together, as opposed to the business world. Sometimes you're just looking for the almighty dollar. My wife worked in the medical business for years. She was a group secretary at a hospital where obviously patient care is important, but profit is too. Then she got a job in a nonprofit organization where you're just trying to raise money for cancer research. She found that so much more rewarding. And the people that she met there, I became a volunteer. Like every event possible I had to go to, whether I wanted to or not. Drive a truck or unload a truck or do something, run a bike to lead a 10K. But you felt like it was a different cause, and you met a different group of people. So that's the answer to the original question, is just exposure to so many different kind of people, mostly positive people, as opposed to some of the gripers and moaners that you see on the rest of the world.